Donald Trump's team has come up with a way to disarm Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip and finally bring peace to this enclave. The United States wants to send international paramilitary forces to Gaza for at least 2 years, and they are supposed to establish peace in this region. The United States has already sent a draft resolution to several members of the United Nations Security Council about creating international forces in the Gaza Strip. Now, Trump is waiting for a response from the members of the United Nations Security Council. If they support the idea, then United Nations peacekeepers will be sent to Gaza. But if someone is against it, Arab countries, and not only them, are ready to create their own international forces to enter Gaza and disarm Hamas. Moreover, Trump is basically demanding approval from more than just the United Nations Security Council to deploy international armed forces into the Gaza Strip, but also that all these forces be supported and personally subordinated to him. And to be precise, to the Peace Council, which will be chaired by Donald Trump. But will all this work? Let's discuss it together. My name is Alexei Pecci. Today is November 4th. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and write any detailed comment under this video. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support the channel Alexei Pecci. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support from you. So, the day before, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, Donald stated that the ceasefire agreement reached with his support between the Palestinian movement Hamas and Israel is quite solid. As he said, it's not fragile, it's very solid. He further noted that the Palestinian movement Hamas, if it does not behave properly, can be immediately eliminated. Quote, they know this. If they do not behave properly, they will be immediately eliminated. If I want to disarm Hamas, I will do it very quickly. And today, against the backdrop of these statements by Trump, it became known that the United States sent a resolution to most members of the United Nations Security Council, in which they outlined their vision for establishing order in the Gaza Strip. The draft resolution, which has been classified as confidential but not secret, will grant the United States and other participating countries a broad mandate to govern, manage, and ensure security in this enclave until the end of 2027, with the possibility of extension after that. The draft resolution will also serve as the basis for upcoming United Nations Security Council negotiations, aiming for a vote on adoption in the coming weeks and the deployment of the first troops in the Gaza Strip as early as January. That is, if everything goes according to plan, the first peacekeeping forces could appear in Gaza as early as January. Although it's probably important to make a remark here, it's very important that no one gets confused. An American official told Axios that the international security forces will be enforcement forces, not peacekeeping forces. These forces should have a mandate to enforce peace, not just an observer mandate. And this is important. It's important to establish this right away. Let me explain. United Nations peacekeeping forces really do have different mandates for the use of force and weapons in conflict zones. In the classic form, these are simply forces that stand between the warring parties and monitor the observance of the ceasefire or truce. If a violation occurs, these forces record the violation and report it to United Nations authorities. It's somewhat remotely similar to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which, if you remember, has been present in Ukraine since 2014. They just recorded some violations, but in fact they couldn't do anything themselves. But enforcement forces are a different matter. These are the forces that have the full right to open fire to kill without any approval. If one of the sides violates, if it breaks the ceasefire or truce, and here Trump is absolutely right. If Hamas does not follow the rules, these international forces will have the full right to eliminate the remaining members of the group by force. Let's get specific now. As stated, the forces will include military personnel from several participating countries, and their creation will be carried out in coordination with the so-called Gaza Peace Council, which will be chaired by Donald Trump himself. The project also calls on the Peace Council to continue its activities at least until the end of 2027, with the possibility of repeatedly extending the duration of this agreement. According to the project, the security forces will be responsible for ensuring the security of Gaza's borders with Israel and Egypt, protecting civilians and safeguarding humanitarian corridors, and also for training new Palestinian police forces, with whom they will cooperate in their mission. In the future, these trained Palestinian police forces are expected to become the foundation of Palestine's law enforcement agencies. The project also states that the international security forces, quote, will stabilize the security situation in the Gaza Strip, ensuring the process of demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, including the destruction and prevention of the restoration of military, terrorist, and offensive infrastructure, as well as the final decommissioning of weapons belonging to non-state armed groups. And this is probably the most important point of the entire resolution. This means that the mandate includes the disarmament of HAMAS. If the group or its elements remain, the international forces will have to finish what the Israel Defense Forces started. That's why Israel agreed to the ceasefire, because the United States had already proposed the idea that international forces would eventually finish their job. The draft resolution also states that international forces will take on additional tasks that may be required to maintain the agreement on Gaza. This is another important point, because exactly what those tasks are is not specified. But this means that these forces are getting a very broad mandate in Gaza. As a result, the resolution says, quote, international security forces are called upon to ensure security in the Gaza Strip during the transitional period, during which Israel must gradually withdraw its troops from other areas of the Gaza Strip. And the Palestinian administration must carry out reforms that will allow it to take control of the Gaza Strip for a longer period. And at the moment, as Axios writes, countries such as Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Egypt, and Turkey have expressed their willingness to send their troops to enter Gaza. And what happens next? The draft resolution states that these forces will be deployed in the Gaza Strip under a unified command acceptable to the Peace Council. So, that's another interesting point. The entire operation will be led by Donald Trump because he is the chairman of the Peace Council. And then it is emphasized that the creation of the forces and their operations will be carried out in close cooperation and consultation with Egypt, Iran, and Israel. There is another very interesting point there. The security forces will be authorized, quote, to take all necessary measures to fulfill their mandate in accordance with international law, including international humanitarian law. And here's where it gets interesting. That means it will be these forces, not separate United Nations missions, that will be responsible for humanitarian aid in Gaza. The draft states that aid will be provided exclusively by organizations that cooperate with the Peace Council under the chairmanship of Trump, including organizations such as the United Nations, the Red Cross, and the Red Crescent. So even these organizations will have to work with Trump's Peace Council. If they don't cooperate, they simply won't be allowed in. In fact, the draft resolution also calls for expanding the powers of the Peace Council as a transitional governing administration to set priorities and attract funding for the reconstruction of Gaza until the Palestinian administration, quote, satisfactorily completes its reform program and after the approval of the Peace Council. That's interesting. There is no criteria specified for how the implementation of the reforms can be assessed. According to the draft resolution, the Peace Council will, quote, oversee and support the Palestinian Technocratic Apolitical Committee of Competent Palestinians and the Gaza Strip, which will be responsible for the daily activities of the civil service and administration of Gaza. In short, Trump is asking the United Nations Security Council to give him a full and total mandate to govern Gaza during the transitional period. But how long it will last is not specified, and who really understands how long it could last? The mandate lasts 2 years and can be extended indefinitely. That's why I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.